Thank you so much, Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Himes. Good to see both of you in Munich Security Conference recently. Members of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, thank you for the opportunity to testify on our geopolitical moment. I think it's fitting that this committee should be convening this public session just 4 days after the first anniversary of Putin's criminal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. It's also just a week after President Biden's brave and potentially historic visit to Kiev. And I'll come back to what I mean by potentially. Putin's war underscores 3 crucial and interlocking issues worth highlighting today. And Ranking Member Himes, this will be the forest, a very big forest. First, we live at a historic inflection point as crucial as the periods after World War I, World War II, and the Cold War, where U.S. leadership alongside allies and partners, or the failure of such leadership after World War I, has had global and generational consequences. So I'm referring to the 4th such historic inflection point since World War I. Second, with the enormity of those stakes in mind, Putin's ongoing war in Ukraine underscores both strengths and weaknesses of the U.S. intelligence community in navigating this moment. And there's an urgent necessity to enhance the strengths and address the weaknesses. And then third, what's most urgently required is for the intelligence community and the U.S. government more generally to build a capacity for providing intelligence-driven, longer-term analytical frameworks regarding this strategic competition, so our country can more confidently understand and operationalize the wealth of daily intelligence that it receives. How we manage this generational opportunity before us will dictate how this inflection point turns, just as was the case after World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. And there are 3 possibilities for this outcome. Number 1, the reinvigoration and perhaps reinvention of the global system of institutions and rules we put in place with our partners and allies after World War II. Second, the replacement of that order over time by a Chinese-led and authoritarian-influenced illiberal order. Or third, global chaos and incoherence along the lines of Putin's might makes right worldview. And I'll commend you to Dr. Richard Haas's World in Disarray book and thinking on this issue, which I think is groundbreaking. When describing President Biden's trip to Ukraine as potentially historic, I meant the legacy of that speech depends on what now follows. For Ukraine to prevail requires a surge in military, economic, and political support for Ukraine now to confront an unfolding Russian offensive. That's urgent, for a war of attrition favors Russia. President Biden, also President von der Leyen in the European Union, everyone's talking about we're going to stick with Ukraine as long as it takes. To Ukrainians, that doesn't sound so good, because a war of attrition is against their interests, is against our interests, and so it's better to give them what it takes now to put Putin in a faster position where he's forced either to the negotiating table or out of Ukrainian territory. Money spent now from the U.S. and other allied budgets is a bargain compared to what we'll all need to spend if Russian ambitions advance and China extracts lessons from that outcome. That brings me to the challenges for U.S. intelligence and what it faces at our current inflection point. The Ukraine war has underscored intelligence strengths and understandable weaknesses given how rapidly this landscape has shifted. The U.S. did an extraordinary job of highlighting Putin's war plans, making the extraordinary decision to release our intelligence to warn in advance of the invasion. That undermined Russian disinformation and Putin's conjured narratives. And we're now seeing this again with Secretary Blinken leaking the intelligence of China considering giving more weapons to China. Again, that's a very clever use of intelligence. And when such predictions prove accurate, that bolsters international credibility of U.S. intelligence. And since then, U.S. intelligence has been critical for supporting Ukraine's military operations and planning. On the other hand, U.S. intelligence didn't foresee the alarming Russian military weaknesses. It also underestimated Ukraine's defense capabilities and national resilience. In addition to improving intelligence sharing, the U.S. must reform the intelligence community once more, just as it did in the War on Terror, to meet a world where great power competition is once more a significant threat. And that transformation should begin with human capital. I listened to General Petraeus testify before your committee, and he spent a lot of time on that, and I think he's right. Before I joined the Atlantic Council, I served for more than a quarter of a century as an editor and reporter of the Wall Street Journal. There's a huge difference between a talented news reporter and a reporter whose expertise in a subject allows a deeper analysis of complex issues. That's also true for the Intelligence Committee, and we need more of that deep analytical expertise in specific deep issues like China, like Russia, like the relationship between China and Russia in the intelligence community. If we had possessed those wells of deep analytical knowledge, we might have done a better job of predicting Putin's next steps after the Georgian invasion of 2008, Crimea 2014, in understanding the fundamental weaknesses of Russian military, and in foreseeing China's revisionist turn under President Xi Jinping. Moreover, some organizational changes are necessary to meet the moment. Some are happening with the CIA and DIA having established centers focused on Russia and China. Sorry, I'm focused on China. That's positive. And I'll be very brief here because my written testimony is longer on the issues for the Intelligence Committee, but I'll just give you one example of many in my written testimony. The U.S. should consider adding an intelligence branch to the Department of Commerce. That's been suggested by my Atlantic Council colleague, Jonathan Panikoff, who comes from the intelligence world, to help it keep up with its trade and export control responsibilities. One wouldn't have thought about that during the War on Terror, but now it's absolutely crucial because much of the contest now, strategic competition now, is non-kinetic. And in fact, it could be the non-kinetic side of this that actually decides the outcome. In closing, we need to both acknowledge the shift of the global strategic landscape and respond to it. As with any competition, when your opponent changes or improves their game, when the very rules of the game have been altered, you need to respond or accept defeat, and of course, we don't want to do that. Churchill is credited with saying during World War II, never let a good crisis go to waste. In the Q&A period, I can talk more about this, but the same should be said now of the Ukraine war before it becomes something larger in Europe or something more global. So thank you for your attention.